We are going over linoleum block printing today. What you need is a paper towel, your linoleum block, a piece of plexiglass, a roller, which is called a brayer, and a piece of paper for printing. The linoleum, make sure I check it. I want to make sure it's all been carved out and scraped smooth. Remember, we're leaving all the black lines, and that's what we are going to print, is all the black lines today. So I will give you the ink, usually 3 lines of ink like that, water-soluble printing ink, so everything's going to clean up with water and a sponge at the sinks. So we go ahead and take the ink. We're going to roll this out, and you usually have too much to start with. So when you go to do this, you want to actually push some ink out of the way. You want to push the roller so it actually skids across the plexiglass, and it's not even rolling. We're just kind of pushing ink out of the way, and then you push not as hard, and you go back and forth until you get that sandpaper Velcro sound, like when you pull Velcro apart or you use sandpaper. So you go ahead and push it out of the way, and back and forth so it rolls, and then we're going to go ahead and roll the ink on here. You want to be very careful when you do that, because if the roller falls and tips down in some of these areas that are carved out, then I'll go over how you remove that. But you don't want to get a lot of ink all over the thing. You just don't want to go like this all over it like that. So what you're going to do is just very carefully, you're going to go over the frame or the border all the way around like this. You do need to re-ink the roller once in a while. I want to hold it with one hand, going over the outside, go over the sun and the clouds, chimney. So this takes some time. Carefully trying to get the ink only to be on the lines. All the lines that you work really hard to save. You don't want to get the ink in the areas that are carved out. Finish going over everything. No matter how hard you try and how slow you go, you're probably going to get just a little bit in the areas that are carved out like I have done. That's just basically just what kind of happens anyway. Sometimes it's from maybe a couple areas that aren't carved quite low enough, or the roller does tip just a little bit. But when you're careful, you're not getting a lot of ink in the areas that are carved out. So what we need to do then is kind of tilt it, pick it up carefully, tilt it, make sure everything is kind of shiny black with ink. So that looks pretty good. I do have some ink in some of the wrong areas though, so I'm just going to kind of hold it in those empty areas. Take my finger, rub it in, wipe it off on the paper towel. You don't have to get every little bit out, but you want to try to get most of the larger areas on here. And this is a student example. So there are a few areas that aren't quite carved maybe low enough or scraped smooth enough that the ink was sticking to, no matter how well or how slowly I put the ink on. But overall, it looks pretty good. Okay, when you have it, you want to go ahead and slide the roller and plexiglass out of the way. You need your printing paper. Make sure you have your name on it. And then to go ahead and print, very carefully, you're going to hang on to the edges. You're going to set it in the middle. Okay, very slowly. Going to kind of push it in place. If you just set it down too far, it's probably going to smear everywhere. You're going to get like a blurry kind of a double image print. And then very slowly, you're going to kind of make a sandwich with your hands, flip it over slowly, and then for 90 seconds, so you want to watch the clock or kind of count in your head, you're going to hold it flat with one hand and use the padding between your knuckles on your other hand. You're going to go in slow, small circles, getting the ink to stick to the paper. And then you want to kind of switch them around. This hand right here is going to hold it to keep it from slipping and sliding around. This hand is doing the pressure down onto the paper. Remember, you're not using your knuckles, you're using the padding in between. If that starts to bother you and doesn't feel so good with your hand, you can use the side of your fist or palm of your hand like this, but you need to do probably an extra 30 seconds because you cannot push as hard with the side of your fist or palm of your hand. So going over the whole thing, about 1.5 minutes. If you want to peek at it, you can to see how it's turning out, but don't pick it up too much or it's going to probably slip and slide out of place and be a little bit blurry. So when you're finished, getting a little bit of ink on the back doesn't hurt anything either. And as you can see, it's just a little bit messy how the printing is. When you're finished, peel off the paper, and then we have a print. Let's see how that looks. So it turned out pretty good. There is a little bit of some ink in some of the areas that were carved out. A little bit does not hurt. It kind of gives it a little bit of a texture. But you can see by wiping some out, I don't have a lot of extra ink in the carved out sky or the carved out building or anything like that. So it turned out pretty good. Example of a good quality print. Notice what's different about how it was carved and how the print turned out. It is a reverse image. So instead of the tree on the left, now the tree is on the right. So prints are almost always a reverse mirror image of each other. So what happens next is this goes in the drying rack over along the wall in the corner of the room, which I'll do a little bit later. Remember, we want to do, our goal is to do 3 prints. We want to do another one, so you put it back on the paper towel. Probably need to drag down a little extra ink from the ink that we pushed out of the way, roll it out, then you just re-ink your linoleum and go through the same process. When you're done for the day, what you do is this goes to the sink for your row, and use a sponge and really warm water or hot water in a sponge, and you're very carefully going to get all the ink off the surface. Don't let the water from the faucet hit this directly, and you don't want to get the back wet. If the back gets wet, it's going to curl up really bad, or maybe probably worse than that, and it could easily crack. Okay, so you want to very carefully clean this with a sponge, keep rinsing the sponge out under the water, clean that off. When you're done, then you want to do what's called blot drying. You're going to take a paper towel, you're just going to kind of tap it like this to get all the water off. If you scrub the sponge, or if you scrub the paper towel, you can break off your lines, and you work very hard to work on part of your qualities being saving the lines. So be careful you don't scrub the sponge or scrub the paper towel. Just going to kind of tap it on there like that. And this goes in the bottom of the pile in the middle of the room, which I will do here in a little bit. Roller and plexiglass, simply sit these over on the island counter. So if someone else needs them later in the period, they can use them, and then I'll just take care of these after class, and I'm just going to use a warm or hot water in the sponge also, and then dry these off. So that was an example of how you go through the process with materials, how you do a quality print, and then I kind of went over some of the cleanup. Good luck printing, and I hope that helps not only verbally explain with words, but visually kind of explain how it works with doing linoleum block printing.